Welcome to Talent Titans, the podcast where we bring you entrepreneurs and leaders from the global staffing industry. I'm your host, Suki Sodi. Now let's jump right on in and welcome today's Titan. Hi, welcome back to another episode of Talent Titans. We've got Jaime Alvarez with us today, and we're going to be talking about leading with empathy. Jaime, welcome.
Thank you, Suki. Nice to see you.
Likewise. For those that don't know you, just want to tell people a little bit about who you are?
Of course. Jaime Alvarez. I am originally from Colombia. Have been in Canada for 24 years now, actually. In the industry for about 20, just shy of 21 years as well. I work at an organization called Brunel. We do recruitment globally, focus on perm, contracting, and RPO. I manage a global division for RPO, recruitment process outsourcing. This is where we do the consulting part of recruitment.
Amazing. Thank you for that. So let's just dive right in. And I really want to kind of like understand your journey, I guess, right? So how has your journey influenced your approach to leading with empathy, especially when you're working with diverse teams across the globe like you do?
Yeah, so I've been very fortunate that my career has taken me through working on a global scale for more than 15 years now. Even when I started, I did cross-border recruitment between Canada and the US, California particularly, and Texas, which are very different cultures from Canada. So I've been very exposed to, so very fortunate from that point. But subconsciously, I think from an upbringing perspective, I was very lucky as well. Growing up in Colombia, I went to a German school all of my life. And I grew up in a household where I have my mom and had 5 sisters, all older than me. So we had a very different approach. My dad, unfortunately, died when I was young. So we had a very different approach on how we viewed things in life. And I think leading it with empathy starts from the household. You know,
Yes.
that's where you really learn how you feel for others, the way that they're living in their lives, what they're going through at work, and so on.
Yeah. Well, you were the youngest.
The baby.
And then 5 women, right?
Yes.
So that would have shown you the sense of the independence of women and that not questioning, but seeing them making those decisions and being very, very successful. So that in essence, that's been your role model.
That has been absolutely my role model. In fact, I can say that this whole thing about gender balance and women in power and so on, I really came to learn it or become aware of it when I was in Canada and about 21 or 22 years old. It wasn't a thing for me. I just saw my sisters become even the breadwinners at home. Not that that's the determining factor, but they were always powerful women who made their decisions, had their careers, or if they wanted to stay at home for a while, they decided to stay at home for their kids, but very strong in decision-making, independent as well. And so this whole thing for me was just normal. You know, it doesn't matter. There's no difference there.
Yeah. So I guess I can almost picture everyone starting to talk about women in leadership, empowering women, etc. And you're like, hang on a second, what is that? Because to you, it was so normal by the sounds of it.
Exactly. And just bringing it back to the topic today, empathy. You have to have empathy because they're human beings. It doesn't matter if they're from Africa, from Australia, from Europe, from the UK, from the Americas, men, women, in between, whatever their choices are. It doesn't matter, right? You got to be empathetic to everyone's needs as a leader.
And I think I totally agree with everything you've just said there, right? And I guess growing up the way you did, your dad passing away when you were young, you being the youngest, then you moving to Canada, right? So that's a lot of growth personally, and of course, then that leads to professionally, right? And then you said you went to a German school.
I lived in Germany. Yeah, I finished my high school in Germany as a student exchange.
Okay.
Then I went back to Colombia for just under a year, and then came to Canada. And it's funny because when you're I was very fortunate. I went on a scholarship to a private German school. And when that scholarship wasn't enough, then my sisters would help pay for it. And it was, the reason why I say that is because there were many other kids in my situation who had very different financial backgrounds and could not necessarily afford to pay for the school. But the government of Germany at the time and the government of Colombia came together to support these kids with education. So in my own classroom, I had kids that One of the dads was the owner of one of the biggest hospitals in the city. Some kids that needed subsidy to take the bus to school. So
Wow.
we had everything, and it shows you the value of just being a human.
Yeah.
It was very focused on that, and I think that's where it all started. It doesn't matter who you are; we all have different needs, and those needs need to be met one way or another. Who are we as leaders to determine those for them?
Yeah. And I think I totally agree with everything you just said there. I just think traveling internationally in your youth, there's just nothing, that world experience, that life experience, no book's going to teach you that, right? It's meeting different cultures. One of the things my husband and I always said was, we're going to take the kids traveling when they're young,
Absolutely,
right? So
I do
we
the
would,
same.
yeah, exactly, right? Because we'd expose them to so many different cultures, right? And I think that's where they get the understanding that people aren't really that different.
Yeah, look, I gotta tell you something. It's a side story. You don't know this one, Suki.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I was thinking about this topic just a couple days ago, and thinking about particularly this question you're asking me. How things happen, or where does this empathy come from in leadership?
Yep.
So on Monday, I'll be a dad right now, and I will say that I'm very proud of both my kids. Both of them won gold and silver in their Jiu-Jitsu Ontario championships. And on Monday, one of them was training. So that my 8-year-old is a really sweet, kind kid. When he gets on the mats, he's a tiger. He just tears apart. And then he stops again, and he wants to go la 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 and play.
Yeah.
On Monday, there was this new kid in class, and he felt a little bit lost. And other kids usually don't want to fight or roll with my son because they're a bit afraid of him. It's how it works at that age.
Yeah.
He took this kid brand new, held him by the hand, and said, "Hey, I'm going to show you the warm ups. I'm going to show you how to
Oh,
do this, and I'm going to show you the moves really gently so you can learn them and go through it." And then the coach approached me and said, "We're building leaders."
yeah.
And that empathy that he had for this, and he does this regularly with other kids that are of lower
Yep.
ranks than he is. But the point I'm trying to make is, I think there are some things that you learn for sure from example, or just who you are in your heart, but many things are just your nature, who you
Yeah.
are as a human being.
But
So
you've shown him from a young age what empathy
yeah,
looks
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
right?
for
You haven't
sure.
intentionally set out to say, oh, this is what empathy is. It's that learnt behavior.
Yeah, for sure. So it's seeing leadership and empathy at such a young age was such a proud moment for me, and
Yep.
and I can help but start to see it in others. I start to notice this and seeing, if we just had a little bit more empathy, I think the world would be a better place.
I totally agree with you, right? And they're tomorrow's leaders. So if they're learning empathy, true leadership, compassion now, that 10, 20 years time when they're the leaders, we'd be in a much better place than we are today,
I agree.
right? So recruitment, right? And sales. It's a high stake environment, right? How do you balance the need for empathy with full results driven performance?
Okay, so I think that's a super interesting question because we confuse empathy with our responsibilities at work, which
Yep.
is which is maintaining a certain level of quality or performance, and we also mistaken it for how we communicate, or what we communicate to others, or not wanting others to feel upset, or whatnot. That's not what empathy is. In fact, for me, it's a complete opposite. Empathy for me is creating at work, at least in performance and so on, is creating an environment where people understand, everybody's clear, including myself, that we have goals to meet. It is my job as a leader to make sure that they have it clear. When things are not there, empathy also means letting them know that they're not doing it right, that we're not meeting the mark, that they're not kept in the dark, that we can do better, that this is support we're going to have. And I always tell my team, it probably sounds like a broken record, if you don't know something, raise your hand. We may not help you in the way that you want to be helped, but help is going to come your way anyhow. That is what empathy is all about. I get paid to do a job, and my job is to make sure that we meet certain criteria. They
Yep.
get paid to do that job that they have as well. So if we think that we cannot have difficult conversations with people, I think we are already erring away from empathy. We're not being empathetic to ourselves, to them, to the organization, and to our responsibilities. So creating an environment that has a little bit of conflict. I'm not saying fighting, just
Yeah. Yeah.
conflict. From conflict we grow. differences of opinion, as long as they're secure about their job, like we're not going to use this line of, if you don't do this, you're going to get fired kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's not the way to do it. That's not empathetic. But I think if we're saying, look, we're going to stretch you, we got to do this better, we're going to do that there. Don't worry about your job. Don't worry about it. This is not about that. This is about continuous growth. I think that's where you can be empathetic to your team.
One of my clients calls that positive agitation.
Yeah,
Right?
why not?
Yeah, because you're
That's
right. Because
let's do that.
what's happened is people look at empathy, right? Empathy is meeting someone where they're at in their emotions and what have you. But if they are, that's fine. But if you just meet them there and you do nothing about it, okay, you're having a bad day. Okay, great. I get it. Yeah, you don't want to feel like working today. Okay, cool. Yeah, you're being empathetic, but you're also killing the business and they're going to be out of a job anyhow because they'll end up being fired and you'll probably get fired as well, right? Because you're ultimately
Yeah.
accountability, right? So I think a lot of people confuse the two. A lot of people confuse, and I think social media is to blame for that because we've created this, if you don't like what your boss says, leave,
Yeah.
right? I was speaking to a lady the other day, and it was actually a girlfriend of mine, and we took a spa day on Friday, and she was telling me that something had happened in the office. One of the girls was off, so she'd said to her colleagues who were a lot younger than her, "Okay, so we have to do this. She's off. Let's divvy the work up, right? And between the three of us, we'll do it." One of them turned around to her and said, "That's not in my job description. Wouldn't do it, right?" To help her colleague was not in her job description.
You know, I know what I want to say, and it's not adept for this podcast. So I'll, I'll just say that my comment to it is what a shame that we've gotten to that,
Yeah,
and that we cannot build a culture of flexibility, acceptance, and empathy. When somebody else needs a hand, why not?
yeah.
Why not just give a hand? It's not to get something in return. Just give a hand.
But you just made me think of something. We always talk about empathetic, and that's what we're talking about, empathetic leadership. But empathy goes two ways,
Absolutely.
right? So in this particular case, my girlfriend she was like, well, I had to sit down and do it because then the person that's off would have been a bit of a problem when she got back, right? So it's something that needed to be dealt with. But the fact that her job description was thrown back at her.
Yeah, that's I mean, that would be a total different conversation, job descriptions. But I think, unfortunately, at work there needs to be a culture. What are we trying to achieve in the organization? And some companies may not call it empathy, but a lot of organizations have something around caring for people.
Yep.
I mean, in essence, that is having empathy, right?
But you've got to live it, breathe it, practice it.
Exactly. And you gotta chew it down for people. What
Yeah.
does it really mean? Because so what if I upset you a little bit? You know,
Yeah.
because something needs improving, not because I'm being rude or
Mean.
anything.
Yeah.
That's a different story. But because there's something that needs correction or more work or a different angle or we simply failed at a project. These things happen, and we can't hide away from the truth. That would be unempathetic as well.
Yeah. Because what we're doing is, I often get told I'm very direct. And I'm like, I'd rather tell you exactly what I'm thinking than have you guessing. I'd rather you said to me, Suki, no, you're wrong there. And this is why. Here's a different perspective.
Yeah.
I'm all for, rather than, yeah, agree. And then I come back and say, is the project done? Where are we? And it's like, well, no, I didn't get it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I might go to the corner and feel sorry for myself for 5 minutes, but then I know and we're on.
Yeah, we're on, we're back, right? So how do you, staying with that, how do you cultivate that empathetic culture that you just mentioned? And how do you get that to trickle down through the organization then?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think there are two very key pieces of for me at least. One of them is communication. So if you're able to communicate it every time you have a team meeting, a town hall, and I try to stay away from let's be empathetic, like
Yeah,
otherwise it sounds like wow, Charlie Brown
yeah,
repeating the same words and people miss him. So it's more about, for example, I close every meeting that I have with the team. We have a bigger monthly team meeting, and I close it every time with appreciation. So thank you so much for. And I think that's a way of recognizing what they have already done. So that drives a culture already of empathy, appreciation, acknowledgement, and that's a big part of it. It cannot be just saying the things we need to correct, or keeping them behind a door or closet, that I gave somebody a praise. And again, it's not about the praise, it's about the acknowledgement, the culture you're building behind it, the recognition, the appreciation. So that's one for me. So you're constantly communicating that all the time. But then the second one is your actions, right? So I have a team member, unfortunately, he was traveling back home for 4 weeks to get married, and 2 weeks ahead of that, his dad passed away.
Oh no.
So it was a really sad situation. It's hard because we're co-workers, we're not buddies, but I
Yep.
still want him to feel that from a work perspective, we got you. You have nothing to worry about. And the whole team wrote him a little message. We wrote him a card. And then the organization went and of course, led by our group as well. But the organization went and sent flowers, like you would,
Yep.
check that mark. Not that that's the reason they did it, but that's what you do.
Yeah.
But we did something individually for ourselves to make sure that we acknowledge that. And what I'm really proud of is that the team came up with that idea directly. He said, you know what, the organization, Brunel's going to do something, but we are the co-workers. We're the team. We know he's feeling pain. Let's give him support. Let's let him know not only that we're there for him, but also we're going to take care of the stuff he was doing here. To me, that was really beautiful, that the ongoing conversation and leadership that we've been exposed to as a group carries through in situations like that. I can give you many more smaller examples.
Yep.
Just living it on a day-to-day basis, to me, that was a big reaction. It may seem obvious to many, but it doesn't happen all the time. I can tell you that.
But one of the things I see everybody's, especially COVID, right? Companies are like, oh, we're people first, we're people first, we're people first. And then you look at it and you look at how they're treating their people, right? And I'm going to go back to the boardroom, that leadership team. It trickles down. But what I see a lot of, unfortunately, is the executives, the C-suite, they don't give a toss about leading with empathy, right? They're so focused on driving their results. And I know I'm generalizing, so apologies to the handful that, right? But the message they're portraying outside is they're an empathetic leader, yet they're not leading their direct reports with empathy. Yet what I see is and it's trick, and somewhere along here, somebody actually is leading with empathy, right? So you have this very varied culture. You end up with Team A, who Jaime runs, right? So that whole division is that, they've got the accountability, but there's the empathy piece there as well. Team B, there's none of that, right? There is that, and it's all the same organization. So I don't know whether you're going to agree with me on this or not, but I actually think most organizations have really not thought about what true empathetic leadership should look like. They've seen their competitors do it, so they do it. This is what social media, so they're doing it. I actually think I can't think of a single company, I'm going to stick with staffing, where everybody leads, has an empathetic leadership style. I can't, right? I can think of individuals in there, but not a company. So I guess where I'm coming back to is it's more of a leadership decision here. It's more of a, how do I want to show up as a leader for my team?
I don't have anything except for my current feelings and thoughts based on what you
Yep.
just said, right? I don't have anything to go by. But I think I will agree with you. And I think I would separate it in two boxes. I think organizations as a company, I don't think they need to be empathetic. It's the company, it's a
Yep.
thing. It's a thing. And what makes a company are the people, right? So then that's a different story. There's something that my manager, I have a lot of respect for her, and her decision making capability is incredible. She actually, one of her pillars of success, and she focuses on three most of the time, is humanocracy.
Okay.
Now, I've come to learn how that works, and I really appreciate it, and I believe it fully. Now, there's also a way where, sorry, a part of it where you have to think, okay, I mean, we have all, if you're a leader, we have all gone through a time, unfortunately, we've had to make cuts,
Yep,
right? Budgets, a year wasn't the same, or we're going in a different direction,
that's
whatever it is.
business.
And I think that's one of the areas where you can truly see how a leader manages empathy. And what I have come to realize is if you have a team that tries their best, and the best doesn't mean that they're always excelling, the best
Yeah,
looks different every day, then it's going to be a harder decision to make on why you are choosing one person to leave versus the other. I've come to realize that skill is not everything when companies are making those decisions. And I heard somebody in my organization say, I know that that person's not doing well, but they're dealing with something personal that's really big, a personal critical illness. I don't have the heart to do it. So we're going to have to figure out a way to work around that. And myself personally, you're going to smile because you know this case. I hired somebody unknowingly that had a severe learning disability in recruitment and didn't know how to schedule a meeting. Remember, that's
I remember
you
that.
know
Yeah.
how to schedule a meeting, and I was panicking. But it comes down to, okay, well, how can we make it work? He's a human being. He brings excellent value elsewhere. We got to find a way to make it work. And I think those are the things that sometimes we are really afraid of as leaders. I'm going to expand on this a little bit. We don't like to take on hard work sometimes on people.
Good point.
We think the easy way is just to, let's just let him go.
Let them go, replace them.
And sometimes it is the right decision. Sometimes there are team members that can be, I'm going to use the word toxic for the rest of the team,
Yep,
that simply doesn't fit what you're trying
yep.
to achieve in the vision. And you have to make that call. But many times it comes down to, is this a challenge that they have personal that we can help them with and we can work around so we can still succeed and work as a team? And I think that takes work, focus, engagement, and everybody pulling together to get there. And many times leaders don't want it.
No. And they don't want it because number of different reasons. They choose not to. It's like not my job type of thing. Although they're empathetic and somebody's got an issue, they get that, but they're like, it's not my job, right? So let's replace. And others are in areas where, you know what, as much as they want to do it, their powers above are simply saying no,
Yep.
right? We're not doing this. And I think it boils down to the individual, because is the individual willing to do the work that, because you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink,
Exactly.
right? So I think for me, I look at it, is the how much accountability is this individual taking for their own development, right? Because ultimately this year's been pretty bad for most agencies. If the ship is sinking, you have no choice but to lighten the load.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's say you gotta on the ship you gotta dump 100 kilos or something, right? Well, are you gonna dump that 100 kilo bag, or are you gonna dump 250s, or are you gonna dump 425s, right? That's the piece where I like what you said about that compassion piece coming in, because what you said about your colleague, somebody was going through. You just can't do that to somebody. You can't do that to somebody that has been pulling in the same direction as you,
Yes.
doing their part. They've been meeting you, head to head, responsible, doing their debt. You just can't. Well, I couldn't do that to somebody,
Yeah. And we
right?
didn't. I'm really proud to say we didn't as an organization, despite the need to make that change. We didn't. So it made me feel good at that moment to be
What's
a
the
part.
message you send to everybody else as well, though?
Absolutely. And the thing is, you're right about that. But in this case, nobody knows.
Oh, wow.
Only the leadership team knows. And that's, I think that's ever more powerful when decisions are made in a certain way that is not for the message to be sent, but because this is our conviction. I think that's what
Yeah, that's
drives it
powerful.
daily. You were talking about how do you trickle that down. That's how, decisions that you make daily that drive that conviction. That's powerful.
And you know what? That individual, from what I've gathered now, isn't even aware that happened,
No,
right?
you're not.
So, because that would have been another thing on his or her plate, right?
Exactly.
And you
One
know
day
what?
they'll find out.
Sorry?
One day they'll find out because that's just
Yeah.
how it is. But
Yeah, they'll find out one day when their current situation is resolved,
exactly.
right? And then they have the capacity to take that on, I guess. Talk to me about this in practice. Now, you gave me a small example, not small, but an example of somebody there. But where have you had a really challenging situation? I'm going to give you a scenario and see if you've got had this. But you've got a client. We're as good as our last placement in our industry, right? We're sales. You've got a client. Delivery's not happening, right? So the client's upset, they're not getting the delivery, but you've got somebody in the team who's responsible for that. How have you used empathy to turn that challenging situation individual around?
Internally, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't
So,
have to be at Brunel, previous life, doesn't matter.
well, I'll preface it with saying that in what I do, the majority of my projects and clients are clients that are facing some big challenges and need support. So they have broken practices. So already
Yep.
we're starting at a loss, right? So I'll preface that because yes, a lot of times that's how it is. I had a team member. She struggled with alcohol. Sorry, she was a recovering alcoholic at some point, and she had a challenge working with others. She had a lot of insecurities, but at the same time, she was a very strong recruiter, excellent account manager, but she felt like people were out to get her. She
Yep.
ended up with that. Um,
Trust issues.
very very strong, unfortunately, and it's not just because of her recovering. I'll loop this together. She had a tough upbringing and all that, and I remember at the time a couple of colleagues telling me, are you sure you want to hire that person? And I said, yes. Again, if I believe in this, I got to stand by it. And part of it
Yep.
is having in my team a truly diverse group of people that have come from different backgrounds, challenges, and be inclusive with them. We had a project that established a certain way. What I had to do, and it wasn't really working. The client could start to feel now that the culture from us wasn't right, and I'm like, oh my god, when it gets to the client, it's challenging. So I had a one-to-one with the client, heart-to-heart with the client, and I explained the situation the way that it was, and I said, look, I understand if this is not going to work for you, but I got to make some changes in the project. Either I let the team go and build a
Yep.
new one, or I make it work in this way. And they said, wow, thank you so much. Thank you for being transparent. Usually we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Let's give it a try for 2 months and see what happens. Well, it's been more than 3 years already with this client. Coming in the first 7 months, I think we're afraid to be vulnerable. Internally, we just restructured in a way that that person had the way to shine, the way that they could shine. They felt comfortable, non-threatened. They had accountability, and that's another way of showing empathy. It's okay to be vulnerable. Like
I think we
you're
think
not
we have to
alone.
have all the answers.
Yeah, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think we kind of think we have to have the answers. And we've got to be the cleverest person in the room, right? So that brings me on to my next question. How do you balance that empathy and accountability, right? So how the two coexist in a team, but the compassion doesn't compromise performance, right? So how do you make sure that ultimately the results are there? Because if the results are not there, none of us have a job.
Exactly.
So how do you do that?
Honestly speaking, for a person like me, it is a conscious decision that challenges me. Some people have, we interviewed somebody recently who said, I have a low need to nurture. And I was like,
Okay.
wow, and you know what? She was the right person for the job because we needed somebody tough, quote unquote, for that. Whereas I have a high need to nurture, right? So my empathy is there.
That's an interesting example.
And this is why I'm saying I have to make a conscious decision every time, intentional every time. So I have to evaluate myself and question myself whether I am the initial reaction that I have to a situation or the decision that I initially want to make is based on my need to nurture or the right one for the business. This is something that I've come to learn over the years as I grow up. And I don't think I'll ever stop learning it because the situations become ever more challenging as you continue to grow. But that is from an internal perspective, that's how I do. So I question myself, where is this coming from? Am I really being loyal to what I need to be loyal to, which is my responsibilities and what I'm getting paid to do, essentially?
Yep.
Am I answering to that? If the answer is no, in any way, shape, or form, I need to correct my course of action. And then with the team, I just have to be honest. I can't. My team will tell you any day that if there's one thing they're going to get from me is transparency.
Hmm.
And for new people that have joined my team, they have said, "Well, that's a lot of information. I don't know if I want to be exposed to that." Um, but the truth is that the only way to build a culture of transparency and accountability, people care when you tell them. If you're keeping them away from things, they're no longer involved. You
Yep.
keep them. You might be surprised with the level of commitment that you get from your team and empowerment.
I think just the comment you made about in the interview, you tell them and are like, wow, it's because they've not seen it before, right? So they're like, hang on, is this for real? I love what you said. I just want to back up a second. I love what you said about you hired somebody who said their need to be nurtured is really low or something to that effect,
They
right?
have a low need to nurture. Yeah.
Low need to nurture. You have a need to nurture. Most people would have not hired that person because of that. The management style is out of line, right? The way you manage is not how this individual wants to be managed, I guess, right? Most managers, leaders would have probably said, you know what, not going to hire that person, right? Would have looked at it and said, that's going to be too much of a headache, too much change for me, I guess,
Yeah.
right? It's what they would have thought.
I agree. I was taught there was he wasn't necessarily a mentor, but I took him as one maybe 18 years ago or something like that. He works in mining. He's a CHRO at one of the largest mining companies in the world today. He was a candidate and he said, I'm just going to tell you something right now. He was my candidate. He said, I'm going to tell you something, Jamie, right now. I will never hire a mirror image of me because if I want change, I will never be able to do it. And that line, that just stuck.
Yeah.
And I actually pursue actively to hire people that are different from me always. Now this was a very challenging because it hits a different nerve
Yeah.
about the nurturing part. But overall, I if I'm getting another mini Jamie, well, what's the point?
This is amazing because so many people wouldn't be looking at the way you are. And you said earlier about how you have to look back and say, again, I can't remember exact words, but Jamie, where is this coming from? Right? So you went internal. Most people go external. I am reacting this way because you done this.
My therapist would be proud.
There you go. You got to win. Therapist got to win for you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, there you go.
But it's true though. Most people would be looking at it and saying, "No, you made me react like this. So your actions are making me react like this." What you're saying is, okay, their actions are their actions. Why am I reacting to their actions this way?
That's how I view it, and I have a very strong conviction of that.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think there's many people that look at it the way you do. Because you're
Well,
right, right?
I mean, it's right for me, and I think it is right, but it's again what I talked about accountability and vulnerability. And if we don't say things, if we don't lead a life from our hearts, how can we really expect others to do the same around us? We can't.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work that way.
So leading with empathy, especially in your experience, right? Surely that's got to have a really positive impact on retention, engagement.
Yes, I think I had one person resign at Brunel. I have had to make some cuts because of projects, but I think I only had one person, sorry, two people resign. One of them was there for only 2 weeks and he just wasn't right. But the other one was somebody who had been there for a while and wanted to go back to IT. So it wasn't really
Wow.
a team issue. And at a peak, we were 27, I want to say. So it's been 4 years. Yeah. And in my previous life, Suki, you know it, peak, we were 75, I believe. And I had 7 resignations in 10 years. So
Wow.
it's the engagement that's driven from true empathy has worked out for me. I cannot say for anybody else.
Yeah.
It has worked out for me.
I mean, I know we're coming up to our time, but I want to ask you one last question. What advice would you give to leaders wanting to be intentional about incorporating empathy into their management style, especially if they're new to management in the first place?
That's a really loaded question, but I'll tell you what. I have a mentor in my life who's at work. And she presents as a very, very strong person, you know, challenging at times. But she's also the kind of person that will say it as it is, you know, and a bit rough. You know, this is her communication style. She'll send an email every now and then, say, just a line, say, hey, you okay? You know,
Oh,
I think it's really important to recognize that we are not our team and the team are not us. And we may be excellent at writing this report and that we have the same expectations of our team. And that's wrong as a leader, to have such expectations. In fact, to have many expectations other than the ones that you and that person have agreed to go after. And you can stretch them, and push them hard to get further. But you need to, just like you said, meet them where they're at and constantly communicate with them how we're doing against that. You know, let's measure it together. Let's get to that and get their buy-in. If they don't want to do something, you're not going to get there. Find the common ground on what you want to achieve, measure it, manage it, stay in touch with them. But never forget that they're humans. They probably have a family. They probably have issues that they need to resolve. And today might not look the same as tomorrow. So just single it out and send a note or send a text or ask on the side, are you okay? I don't need to know details, but are you okay? You know, do you need a hand? I think that goes so far and it's really appreciated. That's what sets those times apart from, oh my God, I had the worst meeting with my boss, to, you know what, I had a challenging conversation with my manager, but I know they got my back. I think that's what makes a difference.
That's just so beautifully said, because you're right, that message. I have a client, if I don't talk to him for a couple of weeks, I'll just get a random text message saying, checking in.
Yeah.
Right? Just checking in. You okay? Or just a voice note. Hey, I was wherever, I haven't spoken to you. How's it going? Right?
Yeah.
And that's all it takes. It's just letting people know that you care, because we do have to have those tough conversations.
Yeah.
We have to have those tough conversations. The other week we were out to dinner with my team, and Q said something that I was just like, wow. So he's worked for one of the big, larger companies before he joined us. And he said the biggest difference he's found between working them and us is we drive results. I like my numbers. You gotta do the activity, else none of us have a job, right?
Yeah.
But he said the difference is, if a deal falls through, you never beat me up for the deal falling through. You said, whereas I'm used to, if a deal fell through, where are you getting that revenue from? How are you replacing that revenue? He's like, you never do that. Right. And he was like, so thank you for not beating me up over it or something. I was just like, wow. Because I never thought that that's how I do it. But my mindset is, you've done all the activity, the hard work. If something doesn't happen, that's life. No point beating you up over it.
Exactly.
Okay, so we can carry on talking for a lot longer now, right? But let's wrap this up. For anybody that wants to reach out to you and talk about this a little bit more, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is usually the best. I am as Jaime Alvarez at Brunel, Brunel, as Global Head of RPO. Please connect. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. And we're going to see you at the summit in April as
absolutely.
well.
Absolutely.
Yep. So that'll be the third year there. So looking forward to that. Jaime, thank you ever so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Suki. Always
All
a
right.
pleasure.
Take care. Thanks. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Talent Titans, brought to you by Recruitment Professional Forum, where they're building a grassroots community for professionals and leaders in the recruitment industry to collaborate, advocate, and advance the profession. If you liked or were inspired by what you heard, make sure to follow, subscribe, and even leave a review. It lets more talented recruiters like you find the show. Until next time, keep on being a talent titan.